Senator Collins is no stranger to hard work and long hours. As most of you probably know, she has never missed a vote in her 21 years as senator. That's amazing. Before we begin on this Veterans Day, I think it wouldn't be right to not thank, first of all, our Volk Packaging veterans who are here today with us, and all veterans. I would ask if we could just take a moment and have all veterans stand up so we can thank you for your service. Now, please join me in welcoming Senator Susan Collins to lead us in this important discussion about the future of American tax policy with our special guest, Ivanka Trump.
I think I'm up first. First of all, welcome everyone. It's such a great pleasure to welcome Ivanka Trump to the great state of Maine. Ivanka is an accomplished businesswoman, a devoted mother of 3, and a key advisor to the President of the United States. And I couldn't be happier to have her here in the great state of Maine. And I know that you all share that view as well. I've gotten to know Ivanka over the past few months, and we've had many good discussions. And I have found her to be such a passionate advocate for working families, for women, for children. She has such a breadth of knowledge and ideas across the board. And it has been wonderful to get to know you and to have you here in the state that I'm so proud to call home. So thank you for making the trip.
Thank you, Senator.
It's also a great pleasure to introduce to you Vidme Channel to the state of Maine. I guess that you could say she's the United States Treasurer, and I guess you could say that one of the goals of tax reform is to make sure that more of your autographs are in our wallets. And I'm very pleased to also welcome former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth to our state. Nan is going to be our moderator today. Thank you, Nan, for joining us. We're delighted to have you here. Now, I know that Derek already recognized the veterans who are with us today, but I am the daughter of a World War II veteran who was wounded twice in the Battle of the Bulge. He has 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star. And so I want to, again, have us all acknowledge all of the veterans who are here today with our eternal gratitude. Please stand again so that we can thank you. Without you, we would not live in the freest country in the world, and we thank you for your sacrifice. I also, of course, want to thank Derek and Douglas for opening their business on very short notice to accommodate us today. Both of them do such a great job of running this third-generation family business, the kind of business that is the heart and soul of so many Maine communities. So thank you, Derek and Douglas, for inviting us here today. We're only sorry that Derek's wife, Amy, couldn't be with us today. As you know, she's a state senator, and she does a fabulous job of representing her constituents. So I'm sure she'll get a full report of everything that occurred today. Well, it has been said that what America most needs is a tax code that looks like it was designed on purpose. That's not what it looks like today. I don't think that there is a single American who believes that our tax code is simple or fair or pro-economic growth and job creation. And those are the goals of tax reform. We want to help our working families and our small businesses and our larger businesses create jobs right here in America, not overseas. And so that is why we've gathered today to have a discussion of tax reform, and we look forward to that discussion with all of you. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and a special thank you to Ivanka Trump for joining us. Ivanka, thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you for that very kind introduction and the very warm welcome here in Maine. This is a remarkable state and one that I feel very privileged to have visited several times in a recreational capacity. And a very beautiful state and tremendous spirit and warmth here. So thank you for your gracious hospitality. You have truly been a great champion for the people of Maine. And everyone in this room acknowledges and appreciates your hard work. Also, to follow up on what Senator Collins said, I want to thank our great veterans, several of whom we saw are in this audience today. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, although the federal government is officially celebrating it today. We are grateful for your sacrifice and the sacrifice of your families who weren't in uniform but served alongside of you. And really thank you for your tremendous contribution to our country's freedoms that we all enjoy. So on this Veterans Day and every day, we are grateful and we thank you and we honor you. Today, we are here to talk about tax reform and the vital necessity to streamline our tax code, modernize it, simplify it, and make it work for all Americans, which it currently is not doing. It's been over 30 years since meaningful tax reform passed, and over the course of that time, our workforce changed. Today, our workforce looks very different than it did 3 decades ago. Our households change. Today, our homes look very different, with the vast majority of them being dual income, where all parents work, even when there are young children within the home. So in terms of legislative priority and administrative priority, the President, Congress, has rightly determined that tax reform is the most critical goal in the months and obviously hopefully weeks to come. The stated goal is twofold. enable our businesses to be competitive and thrive, and to provide meaningful tax relief to middle-income families. And we firmly believe that the proposed tax plans will accomplish those dual goals. The details are being worked out between the House and the Senate, but the framework is incredibly positive and will have tremendous impact on achieving those goals of enabling our businesses to thrive and enabling our families to thrive. So we'll get into a discussion of some of the particular elements of the plan in over the course of the next hour with Congresswoman Nan, but we are deeply passionate about tax reform, deeply committed to it, and we believe that this is a great product that is going to have tremendous benefit for all Americans. And I'm grateful to be here as an advocate and a champion for tax reform, in particular how it will enable American families and middle-income families to thrive. So thank you for welcoming me here, and I look forward to a robust discussion. Thank you.
I too have family members that have served in Vietnam, and also most recently as the Air Force and the Army and the Navy, and so I applaud your service. I also had the privilege of participating in the Congressional Gold Medal presentation, and it was a real tearjerker. It's a very moving event, a very honorable, and a real privilege to be amongst so many veterans, so thank you very much. I wouldn't think of any other place to be on Veterans Day than here in Maine. Thank you. Structural integrity is really important to your business. I know it well because I have spent 30 years prior to being U.S. Treasurer in the packaging business. No competition, Derek. Don't worry about it, okay? And I actually can tell you how many corrugated boxes can go in a 40-foot trailer. About 2,300, if done right. Okay. So coming here was a real treat. Just the smell of your work, your product, tells me that this is a vibrant company. I mean, every shelf is filled, and they told me, don't lean against the styrofoam, you're going to get dirty. I said, this, I thrived on that. That brought wealth to my family, so thank you very much for inviting me here. Not only is structural integrity important to you, but it's also important for our economy. And that being said, as indicated earlier by both the Senator and Ivanka, it's been a long time since tax reform has taken place, and especially for small business. Tax reform for small business, the last time, at least a data point that I have, is World War II for small businesses. So it's long in coming, and I look forward to continue elaborating on those particular points that are beneficial to small business in this tax reform. It's a unified effort. It's both the House and the Senate and the White House. And it's not a Democrat or Republican or independent. It's a unified effort to do it right for all Americans. Thank you.
Well, thanks once more to all of the folks here who have joined us today. We're going to share some thoughts, some very important ideas about how we get our economy growing again through tax reform. And Ivanka, I wonder if you could tell us just a bit more about specifically how the administration envisions, how you're fostering economic growth, how tax reform fits into that total picture.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So I think what we've seen over the course of the last several months is stock market at historic highs. For the first time in a very long period of time, we're starting to see modest wage growth, which is something that this country has not enjoyed in far too long. And I think the administration's general stance on pulling back overreaching regulations and pretty aggressive deregulation viewpoint. Not all regulation is bad, but a lot of regulation does not achieve the intended goal and places tremendous burden on business, particularly small business, that doesn't have the margin or the ability to deal with overreaching regulations. So I think the combination of deregulation with pro-growth policies coming out of the White House, workforce development, skills training, technical education, the priorities that we're focused on as we think about developing the workforce of the future to enable our American citizens to be able to thrive in the modern economy, and that combination of workforce and education, and how the administration is being very thoughtful, and it's on a personal level a real focus of mine on apprenticeship and skills training. But the combination of deregulation with workforce development with tax reform will be explosive for GDP growth in this country. We got used to hearing that sub 1% growth was the new normal in this country. And already in recent months, we've seen that it doesn't have to be. We've hit 3% multiple times over. We think sustained 3% is highly achievable, albeit conservative, and that the combination of deregulation and comprehensive tax reform will enable us to do far, far better than that. So this administration is focused on job creation, it's focused on growth, it's focused on creating prosperity for all Americans, and we think tax reform is incredibly fundamental to that goal, and are very, very passionate and excited and optimistic that we'll be able to get it done this year.
Well, with the talents we have assembled here, I have no doubt, and thank you, Ivanka, for framing that so importantly. It really is an incredible opportunity for all of us. And apropos of that, Senator Collins, one of the components of tax reform, one of the components for growth is consideration of our corporate rate being 35% at the moment, as you know, while the average for industrialized countries is actually 22%. And of course, Maine is the home to great American companies like New Balance, LLB, and of course, bulk packaging. So what I think everybody would like to know is how will the tax reform give a competitive advantage to companies in Maine? What does that mean for the state you love so much?
When a company looks at where to create jobs and where to invest, it naturally considers the tax rate. And the fact is that our country has the highest corporate tax rate in the entire world. And that puts our good companies, you've mentioned New Balance and LL Bean and so many others, at a competitive disadvantage. And it causes a lot of companies, fortunately not those so much, to decide to locate their plants and create jobs overseas. We want those jobs created here in America. And that's why lowering the corporate rate so that we're more competitive with other countries is vital to economic growth and job creation. In addition, we must never forget our small businesses, and they are responsible in this state for 2 out of 3 net new jobs. And it's really important that we remember that a lot of those companies are not C Corps. They are S Corps. They are companies where, which we call pass-through companies. So we've got to take care of the small businesses as well. And those should be the goals of tax reform on the corporate and business side. But in the end, it's all about creating jobs. That's the purpose, is to make sure that our American companies, big and small, will create good jobs right here in the United States.
Thank you, Senator. And for all the hardworking folks who are listening to you right now, Jovita, you, of course, have a wonderful American story, and you started in your own small business and, of course, moved to become a very important executive in a very big business in this country, very important one. Can you offer some thoughts about, more specifically, just expanding on what Senator Collins said about how tax reform will help small businesses?
As both Ivanka and the senator were speaking, I thought about the 3% GDP. If we could continue that for 10 years, we probably could anticipate 12 million new jobs, about $10 trillion to economic activity, and about a contribution of $3 trillion to our budgetary deficit. And those are some powerful numbers. In addition, the 3% it's doable, because you indicate, Senator, that strengthening job creation, and I call it sustainability. People want to see, there's no longer a cradle-to-grave type environment, but at least you have good paying jobs, because innovation will thrive. When the GDP is thriving and companies come back and they invest in their employees and they invest in research and development, there's opportunities for promotion within these infrastructures, these small businesses. And you're right, I did start out in the private sector, and I spent 30 years in the private sector on a very strong trajectory. Much like the trajectory that I've learned, Senator, that your employment is rebounding. So there's several hundred new jobs since the recession, and that's great news. The foreclosures in the community are improving, and home sales are improving. Those are variables that are indicators when there's job stability, job creation, and stronger wages. And that's what this tax reform is looking to do. When I said World War II, small business reform, tax reform, if this tax reform plan is accepted, we will see a 20% tax rate for small businesses, which is the lowest they would have realized since World War II. That's a significant impact. Not only is that a strong component of the tax reform, but also the amount of investment that we can continue by capital expenditure. In the next 10 years, 100% deduction could be realized. And that means, when I said job creation, it's because now the small business owner can invest in their infrastructure, can invest in research and development and the education of their employees. Because one of the things that really cuts short immediately when budgets are tight is training. Training and marketing. And marketing is the backbone of projecting your business out. And training means the skill sets of your employees are not static. So those are the real the byproduct of a good economy.
Thank you, Jovita. And I think, Senator, if you could expand a bit on that.
Thank you, Nan. I also want to point out that the issue is not the quality of the American workforce. We have the best workers in the world. And by the way, Maine has the best workers in the United States. Just want to put that on the record as well. But if a business is faced with a tax code that actually penalizes them for creating jobs in this country, a lot of them are going to choose to go elsewhere. And that's what we need to correct. And that's why tax reform is such an imperative. It really does come down to jobs. Because given a level playing field, our American workers will prevail every time.
Thank you, Senator. It's true. And obviously, all of the folks here are hardworking Americans. You have your small businesses, you have your families, many concerns. The value of our dollars and what's in our pocket is going to go up with tax reform. Ivanka, if you could share with us, because you're passionate about it, you are a very successful entrepreneur. You're the mother of 3 wonderful children. You understand the challenges of raising a family within the context of working, being a working mother, and you have that in your heart. Can you talk with all of us about what that means to you and what the child tax credit means to you?
Thank you. I have for many years now been advocating for stronger policies to support American working families. I realize how complicated it is to manage the competing demands of work and family, yet I have tremendous resources available to me to help me do it. And too few people are able to get the help that they need. So as part of tax reform, the administration was committed to 2 critical goals. The first we just spoke about, leveling the playing field, enabling our businesses to be competitive, enabling our businesses to thrive, creating jobs, creating wage growth. That is a core pillar. The other is supporting the American working family and recognizing how expensive it is to raise children, how hard it is, and this disproportionately falls on the shoulders of women when they have to leave the workforce to provide unpaid care from minors or adult dependents, which is increasingly a problem and something that Senator Collins has been a huge champion of, elder care and supporting families who are supporting adult dependents. So as part of tax reform, I am incredibly excited to see a materialization of some long-stated goals around expanding the child tax credit to put more money back in the pockets of hardworking Americans at a time when they need it the most, when they're raising their families. So currently under both the House and the Senate bill, it's dramatically expanded north of today's $1,000 per child. The refundability under the Senate plan, which I'm very happy to see, has been increased over the current level of $1,000. There is an additional credit for the benefit of non-child dependents. In the Senate, it's at $500 per non-child dependent. In the House, it's at $300, including the filer and the filer's spouse. These are really important, good ideas that will ensure that this tax plan provides relief to middle-income American families, and that's what we want to accomplish. One other thing I'll mention, because it's spoken about less, but I think incredibly important, is the number of families that will benefit from this credit are going to be expanded dramatically. So right now, to benefit from the CTC, you as a family need to be making $75,000 or less. So that is being raised both in the House and the Senate to encompass many more families in recognition of the costs of caring for children and providing them with education and the resources that they need to thrive. Also, as part of both the House and the Senate bill, the existing child and dependent care credit is preserved. The adoption credit is preserved. The elder care credit is preserved. So when you think about what's been eliminated, it's the loopholes, the things that the lobbyists have inserted over the years. And you think about the things that have remained, the credits that have remained intact. It's those who have large constituents but no lobbyist group, families, and supporting families. And that's what we want to see in tax reform, not the credits that benefit very specific industries, but the credits that benefit the American people and American families. So I am very excited about where the debate is today. Hopefully the bill only gets enhanced from this point forward. and I think it's very consistent with the president's goal of supporting American working families as they exist in the modern economy.
Ivanka, I'd like to add to your particular comment. I'm always setting up Ivanka for something she doesn't expect. But when you talk about the senior care and also child care, that's really, really important. I also visit a lot of small businesses and town halls, smaller than this group. But when I speak to them, at least 77%, and we can verify those numbers, believe that the tax structure has a lot of loopholes and there's not a level playing field. And about 72% of the people say that it's too complicated. So to say that our United States citizens are spending about 6 billion hours every year processing their tax filings is, we could really do a lot more with those hours. The fact that small businesses spend anywhere from $15 to $16 billion to process their taxes, and the fact that we have anywhere from 12 educational incentives and 15 retirement incentives, and each one with their own regulatory, description, and 218 terms to describe marriage. And I say this very interestingly because I think I've seen all three. I've been non-married, married, and divorced. So, or should I say non-married again, right? Okay. I won't go into the numbers, but yes, that is very important to the you and me in this society. The senior care is important because there are a lot of baby boomers that are now responsible for their parents, I being one. And when you have your parents at 80, 70, and 90 with these very lasting, very difficult conditions, and now you go from full-time to part-time, and you're not earning the $50,000 or $60,000. The fact that we have a double standard increase on our taxes, in other words, the first $12,000 to $24,000 is going to be tax-free. That is so important for people who have to stay home and care for their children or their parents.
That is critical. Doubling the standard deduction has an immediate and real impact for so many Americans. So doubling it to north of $12,000 for a single filer or $24,000 for a family is going to have an immediate impact for so many people. So that is, I'm glad you brought that up, and it's certainly very important and really a core pillar of this tax plan.
Absolutely.
But the simplification is true. You mentioned the number of hours. Another statistic that is mind-blowing is that 94% of Americans require professional assistance to file their taxes. That is absurd.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that under this plan, the vast majority of Americans will be able to fill out a single postcard. Simplification democratizes the tax code because complicated codes, we know, only benefits the people who can afford an army of lawyers and accountants to figure out the best possible structure for them. So simplification enables the tax code to really be democratized and to be fair for all. And I think it's very compelling just in terms of also how we collectively would prefer to productively spend our time.
Right. And I promised myself not to say how many billions taxpayers and attorneys make filing taxes because it is a very strong sector, very necessary. Once my management trajectory and compensation trajectory improved, I have had tax consultants for 25 years. So the fact that we can now preserve some of those funds and apply them for long-term investments or retirements for that matter is very important to us.
Well, thank you, Senator and Ms. Ivanka Trump, and of course, Mr. Vidme Channel. We are going to now go to, as our audience knows, we solicited questions from you when you walked in, and we have a few to share. And I'm going to mention, if you wouldn't mind standing up, Jim McCarthy. Can you stand up, Jim from Lyman? Jim, thank you. Thank you for being here. And here is Jim's question. Senator Collins, how exactly can tax policy spur companies to return to the USA here in Maine for manufacturing?
There are some very complicated provisions that are in our tax code now that are going to be changed. And one is that we're going to reduce the corporate rate, which, as I mentioned, is now the highest in the world. So that'll be an incentive. The other is that there are companies that have parked a lot of their capital and profits overseas, because if they come back, if they bring those profits back to the United States, they're going to be hit with that 35%, potentially a 35% corporate rate, or at least the difference between what they have paid in the country they're located and the 35% rate. So we're going to go to a new kind of tax system called the territorial tax system. And that's what most of the world uses. And that will encourage companies to bring back to the United States profits from overseas and invest them right here in this country. But better yet, it will encourage them to invest in America in the first place rather than investing overseas. But there is literally, and the treasurer or Ivanka may know the exact number, but there's hundreds of billions of dollars. I think it's actually more than trillions.
3.5
trillion. Okay. Locked up overseas. A lot. That was good unison then.
We're going to harmonize.
Finishing each other's sentences now. That's
Exactly. Locked up overseas that we want to bring back, give a more favorable rate if these corporations are willing to bring that money back to America. But now all the incentives are for them to keep that money locked up overseas.
It is fascinating because this is a bipartisan issue.
Yes.
Even in Washington, D.C., everyone recognizes the benefit of enabling companies to bring back the money they have parked off our shores and want to facilitate that. But it needed a vehicle to happen. And tax reform is that vehicle. So I think that is incredibly exciting. But one of the great graphs that Javita and Secretary Mnuchin and their team at Treasury had showed me was the Reagan tax cuts and how dropping the corporate rate, sort of what that did to increased investment and prosperity domestically. But interestingly, there was an amazing chart that showed the speed in which the rest of the world said, that's really working, and started to drop their corporate rates to match ours, and then over a course of a number of years, reduce theirs dramatically beneath where our floor was, which stayed the same since those tax cuts. So it's recognized globally to be effective. That's why other countries are doing it. Yet it's been more than 3 decades since we've had any corporate tax rate cuts. So this is really about what you just said, Senator, leveling the playing field and enabling our businesses to be competitive in a global environment.
And apropos of that, Ivanka, actually, Blake Winslow. Blake, good to see you from Presque Isle. Thank you, sir, for your question, which I'm going to direct to Ivanka, actually. And I suspect you're a young entrepreneur. But the question for you is, how will tax reform encourage entrepreneurship among young people?
So it's a great question, and an area that I've been very focused on in my role at the White House is is encouraging entrepreneurship, particularly female entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship generally, and innovation domestically. Obviously, tax reform and making young entrepreneurs want to stay and want to start their businesses in the United States of America as opposed to elsewhere is critical. And people are now leaving school, joining the workforce, and making decisions about where in the world they want to locate, and are too often choosing for it not to be in the United States. So I think tax reform that encourages entrepreneurship to happen domestically is very positive. Obviously, cutting the rates on small business, the rate of small business will be, the tax rate for small businesses will be the lowest level since 1931, which is incredibly exciting. So that's more money back in the pockets of those business owners who can then invest in their workforce, in the infrastructure they need to scale their business, as opposed to maintain their business or simply keep it afloat. So tax reform, I think generally, rising tides lift all ships, and the focus, though, on small business and recognizing that small business is the lifeblood of our economy is why there has been so much thoughtful deliberation about how best to encourage small business owners and entrepreneurs through tax reform. And we think we've accomplished that goal. And Jovita can talk about this a little bit more, because what hasn't been mentioned is the fact that she also worked as deputy director of the Small Business Association, the SBA, which is doing incredible work. And we're aligning very closely with Linda McMahon there and her excellent team as she thinks about providing the capital, the networks, the mentorship opportunities to small businesses and entrepreneurs as they grow and seek to thrive. So she's one of the great champions of tax reform and its particular benefits to small business.
Thank you, Ivanka. Sitting next to an entrepreneur is a real plus, besides being the first daughter. But in addition to what you indicated, Ivanka, I'm thinking about Derek Voigt. You represent one of the 35 million small businesses in the United States, including the farm business. And Linda McMahon, the administrator of SBA, is very focused on the amount of regulation, the amount of fees that banks charge for access to capital. The most significant growing population in that small business sector are women, especially the Hispanic women. And they are the underserved market, and so we have a definite focus on how we can improve that 80% or 80 cents per every dollar lent to women, and improve that to be able to have, if you apply for $1 million, you should get $1 million, not 80% of that. That's one point. The second point is that this administration, this president has stated, for any one regulation you put in, you remove two. And that will inspire the youth to innovate and to take advantage of the market and create businesses, because sometimes we are so over-regulated, you say it's not worth it. We have all these permits. We have to comply. It costs to comply. I have to have a particular staff to support that compliance, and I don't have the budget. So the less regulatory, Senator, that we can sponsor, the better for our young aspiring entrepreneurs. In addition to the regulatory and access to capital, innovation starts at a very young age. We have entrepreneurs still in high school. So as you stated, Senator, we have the best work ethic and innovation and brains in the United States, and we would like to retain them. Repatriation of funds. We talked about the 2.8 million or the 3.4 trillion. When corporate America can bring back those trillions into the United States, they reinvest not only to share owners, but they reinvest in their infrastructure and their young employees. There'll be promotion opportunities, better wages, more R&D, and then obviously more opportunity for all Americans. Thank you.
we have Hannah Abbott's question. Hannah from Portland. Thank you, Hannah, for being here. And Hannah has a question for you, Ivanka. What advice do you have for a young woman who wants to start a business? And I think all three of our commenters can talk about that, starting with you, Ivanka, please.
I am always in awe of entrepreneurs and small business owners because it's really hard. And we were talking about some of the unique barriers for women entrepreneurs and women in business that are very real and that we're working to deconstruct in terms of relative lack of access to capital, networking opportunities, mentorship opportunities, and so we're very focused on changing that dynamic. But I think as an entrepreneur, I think recognizing the enormous challenge and grit and perseverance that's required to succeed, but also for so many women, they choose to become entrepreneurs out of an inspiration to do it their own way and to leave a corporate, outdated, regimented work environment that doesn't enable them to have the flexibility. And this is men and women alike. We're seeing increasingly that people are inspired to start their own businesses and create their own workforces as opposed to joining workforces that don't allow them to have the balance and flexibility and to prioritize their life's goals in the way that they would like. Not that there's any less work. The entrepreneur and the small business owner, you never leave it at the office. You take your work with you. And it's some of the hardest, but oftentimes the most fulfilling work that you can do. So I would say to be able to have the grit and perseverance required to succeed, particularly if that means failing multiple times before ultimately succeeding, you really have to love it. You have to love what you do. You have to love the business you create. We were talking about corrugated boxes a few minutes ago. You have to love boxes, which I think a lot of people in this room do. But it's real if you don't have that deep passion for the business that you're creating, and if you are not wildly optimistic in your viewpoint towards what you can accomplish, you just won't be able to achieve your goals. So find what it is that you love doing, and hopefully we'll create the environment from a regulatory perspective, from a licensure perspective, and from a tax perspective that will enable you to achieve your dreams and accomplish your goals.
Thank you, Ivanka. Senator Collins is a great leader in the Senate of women and a mentor of women.
Well, it's hard to top that advice. I would just say to not be afraid to take risks, that oftentimes people don't have enough confidence in their abilities, and they talk themselves out of following their dream and doing what they really want to do. My second bit of advice would be to choose a mentor. To look for role models and people who can help guide you on your way. I know that when I worked for SBA as a regional administrator, that we had a wonderful program called SCORE, I think it still exists, that matched up experienced business people with entrepreneurs who are just starting out. And I think that kind of mentorship is so important. But Ivanka also said something really important, and that is, it's sort of the old saying of, if at first you don't succeed, try again, that a lot of entrepreneurs don't succeed at first, but they keep at it. They have the drive to do it. And then they do succeed because they don't give up.
Thank you, Senator. And if we can have a word from our U.S. Treasurer, Jovita Carranza.
In summary, the SCORE, I served on their board, and they still have about 10,000 volunteers, and I believe you have some here at Maine. You also have CDFI, so the Community Development, and they're accessible to you. There's about 9 here in Maine. They're very successful. They've contributed over $900 million since their inception in 1994. So great opportunities, great access. The SCORE, the SBDCs, which are small business development centers, as well as women business centers. You are tax payers, and it's free service, free education, free training, free seminars. So it's accessible
Over
to
70
you.
of them across the
Yes,
country.
yes.
They're tremendous resources, these entrepreneurship centers.
So there's, as they indicated, find a mentor, a coach, and the available resources locally, and never give up.
And I think the time has flown by, and thank you to everyone who worked so hard for the state of Maine, for your communities, and for the common goal of making our country stronger and putting more Americans to work. Can we thank Senator Susan Collins, advisor to the President Ivanka Trump, U.S. Treasurer Jovita Carranza, and I'd like to ask each of you if you might have one final thought for us as we close. Senator?
Getting tax reform accomplished is not going to be easy, but it is essential that we come up with a package that does spur economic growth and create jobs. It is essential that we give tax relief to hardworking middle-income families who are struggling day by day to make ends meet. And it's also essential that we keep in mind the goal of simplicity as we do tax reform. And that's why doubling the standard deduction is so important. That's going to mean that somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of taxpayers will be able to file a simple form and not have to itemize. We still have a long ways to go, but it has been so helpful to have had the advocacy of Ivanka Trump as we have been plowing through these very complex issues. And I want to do a special thank you to you on the child tax credit and on the child and dependent care tax credit. Those are so important to families all across America. And without your advocacy, I'm not sure we would have made the kinds of progress that are included in the Senate bills. So thank you so much for the good work that you did.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for coming to Maine.
In closing, I would agree with everything the senator just said about how vital tax reform is and how difficult it is to accomplish. If it was easy, it would have been done already. Decades would not have passed, but we're going to get it done. And in large part because we have great champions like Senator Collins who deeply believe in this plan and how it will benefit middle-income American families and create prosperity for all Americans. So I am very optimistic. We are unified in our goals, and we believe we'll accomplish this, and we'll be very proud and excited to have done just that. So thank you for the warm hospitality that you've shown me here in Maine. I don't want to actually leave.